I'm just another one of Tucker's former colleagues. Didn't always see eye to eye with him, still don't always see eye to eye with him. But again, as a journalist, as somebody who's hungry for information, this was absolutely the right call and the right thing to do. But don't tell that to CNN or our former colleague, Chris Wallace. My gosh, he's having an absolute fit because Tucker got the interview and not him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, if you're just interested in information, you ought to be able to say, okay, so what? Like there's a bias there, just like, you know, Chris, when you sit down with Joe Biden, there's a bias there too. Just saying. So here he is. Listen to his little spiel going off on his former Fox colleague right here.
Tucker Carlson showed up in Moscow this week to interview Vladimir Putin. It turned out to be anything but an interview. Putin droned on for 2 hours and 7 minutes while Tucker sat there like an eager puppy. Occasionally, but rarely, he got in a question, like this one about the power of the deep state in Washington.
It sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who are elected in your telling.
That's right. That's right.
But more telling than what Tucker asked is what he didn't ask. Nothing about why Putin invaded a sovereign country. Nothing about targeting civilians. Nothing about Russian war crimes. A reporter can ask Putin a tough question if he wants a real interview. Why is it that so many of the people that oppose Vladimir Putin end up dead or close to it? But apparently that's not why Tucker went to Moscow. During the Cold War, gullible Westerners who spread Soviet propaganda were dismissed as useful idiots. But calling Tucker that is unfair to useful idiots. No, he's made a cynical decision to chase MAGA's affection for dictators. And what better way to cash in than Putin's Kremlin?
Wow. Ouch. Gave himself a little pat on the back for his interview with Vladimir Putin back in 2018. I can't help but think that this was a little bit motivated by his own ego because, again, let's get back to this. In the spirit of all the information we can get, shouldn't we want it? Shouldn't we hear it? Shouldn't we hear everybody out and understand the bias from which they come from and leave it up to the American people and other journalists and other commentators to look at this with a cold eye and say, okay, this is what I think, this is what I don't think. But no, apparently some of these journalists don't think that you're smart enough. You're not smart enough to look at that and be able to figure out what's what. They think that you're not smart enough to go and seek out all sides, that you're just going to be spoon-fed whatever Tucker Carlson tries to spoon-feed you. And by the way, he didn't really spoon-feed. If you watch his entire thing, including the clip after, we have it, by the way, behind the scenes. If you watch that, he makes it very clear. He's not trying to, stump for Putin in any way, but he is trying to get information out there. I thought about it myself, and I thought, okay, well, are my own biases clouding this in some way, shape, or form? And I thought, well, if MSNBC sat down with the Ayatollah, how would I feel about that? I wouldn't love it, right? But simultaneously, as a journalist, I would say, okay, it's important that we hear from everyone. And I may not like that side, I may not agree with that side, but I'm not going to allow my biases to interfere with what actually may be the truth. And by the way, not saying that I would agree with anything that other side is saying at all. But don't we have the right to hear it? That's really fundamentally the issue here. Well, Tucker Carlson, he has a few things to say about Chris Wallace, and it kind of it goes for the jugular. Let me play this for you because Trump brought Chris Wallace up in an interview with Tucker, and Tucker had some choice words to describe Mr. Wallace.
When I debated him, I said, how come, and this was in front of probably not a friend of yours, Chris Wallace, he was the moderator.
Not a friend.
I said, why is it he wants to be Mike, but he doesn't have the talent? It's one of the
little man.
He wanted to be his father, but he didn't have the talent of his father. Was great. His father,
little fussy man.
His father interviewed me in 60 Minutes.
That's a more polite way of saying the other, right? He's a fussy, fussy little man. And there may be some there. As someone who has worked with both of them, let me just tell you, there's a lot of fussy men in television. And Tucker might be onto just a little something. We'll leave it at that. Fussy. That's the way to describe it. I would also just say he's clearly annoyed and a little bit jealous and had to bring up his own interview, his great interview in 2018 with Vladimir Putin.